IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is sort of a special edition here tonight. We are going to be discussing here soon the pending decision from Texas wide receiver Kaleb Smith, guys. This is a kid that not a lot of people know about, if we're being honest. He's a kid that is really flown under the radar from a recruiting standpoint. He reminds me of one of those kids that goes to a place like Texas Tech or a program we haven't heard of, an Iowa State. You don't know who he is. You don't really hear about him. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, he's a breakout player. And you're like, wow, where'd this kid come from? Or even sometimes these kids go to big-time schools like Justin Jefferson, who from LSU was ranked in the 2000s as a recruit coming out of high school. So interesting young man, very talented player, guys. And as we kind of wait for him to make his decision, he's supposed to make it at 6. But as you all know, very rarely do these kids actually make their decisions on time. So we're gonna kind of just talk a little bit about the backstory and a little bit about him, just kind of him as a player. So to begin, Notre Dame had 4 commitments in the 3 commitments at wide receiver in the 2023 class. They got obviously Braylon James early. They got Jaden Greathouse. They got Rico Flores. And we're feeling like, okay, you add Ronan Hannafin and you're good to go, right? That's where it looked like it was going to go. Ronan Hannafin obviously ends up ultimately decides to sign with Clemson or commit to Clemson. He's going to end up signing with Clemson. And then Notre Dame was kind of left scrambling a little bit. And they've kind of just kind of dove into the film and went and looked around and talked to the staff, got together. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, they discover a kid named Dylan Edwards from Kansas, who they got involved with and eventually flipped. And instead of recruiting him as a running back, they're kind of recruiting him as a hybrid player. He's kind of part running back, part wide receiver, part slot. And the staff kind of decided that, they wanted a 5th guy if they could get the right guy. And for a while, it seemed like Tayshawn Lyons was going to be that guy. And he's a California standout. And all of a sudden, I heard out of nowhere that he may not be the guy the staff is targeting now. So, okay, did some digging and come to find out there's this kid from Texas that I had literally never heard of named Kaleb Smith. And I'm going to not going to lie. I looked at his star rating. I looked at his offer list, had one offer on it, Texas Tech, the school he's committed to. And I said, you can't be serious. Then I watched the film. And Sean, once I did that, you're like, okay, this is that kid that nobody knows about that goes to college, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this kid can ball. And it started to make sense.
Yeah, you talk to the people down in Texas that cover high school football, they mention him in the same breath as Malik Muhammad, somebody that the Irish had on their radar early in the season. And you watch his film and you see, look, I'll be honest, I sent this film to Malik, and Malik hit me back and was like,
Malik Zaire. You had just said Malik Muhammad. I just want to make sure people are.
Yeah, Malik Zaire. And he hits me back and says, yo, he kind of has a Will vibe. And I said, what? Because, that's dangerous. Like, are you talking about Will Fuller? And he's like, yeah. Like, just the way he runs is really easy. It's not, he just flows on the screen. He just floats. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to be too hyperbolic about this kid. I like his film, but I think the value he has, and you guys can go to the importance of this, because I think Notre Dame lacked this year, a true inside slot receiver. He's used to being motioned across, finding places in the zone, beating man to man, drag routes, slant routes, and not only catching the ball with his hands, but then doing some damage with it after he catches it. I don't know if Notre Dame really has anybody on the roster currently or someone that fits that mold in the 23 class. And I think that's why maybe they went in the direction of this kid instead of waiting for Tayshawn Lyons. And it goes back to when we talked to Chancey Stuckey when he first arrived, and he gave his vision for the wide receiver room and what he wanted. And he said he likened it to a starting 5 on a basketball team, with guys having different roles. But he said at certain positions, he wanted those dogs.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing I can say about this wide receiver room. The mentality of all of these receivers are to be dominant, which is a really good thing because I think most of the time we've seen a lot of passive receivers come into Notre Dame and not so many aggressive guys. But this class, I can honestly say everybody that's coming in thinks but feels like they're a number one
Mhm.
or has been a number one for their high school team. And that's a new level for this wide
Yeah.
receiver room. And that's a good feeling for Notre Dame fans that they should have about this young man if he does join the class tonight.
And that's the key. We're going to find out here hopefully over the next hour. Again, supposed to go at 6:00, but as we've learned, we don't necessarily know that. Vince, Notre Dame's we'll find out here if Notre Dame was able to land him or not. But I think the one thing that this showed is people kind of get wrapped up in star ratings, right? And a lot of people kind of look at it, oh, you got to land star ratings and all this kind of stuff. And Notre Dame's done a lot of that in this class. I mean, every single kid currently committed in the class is ranked as a 4-star by at least one recruiting service. And with the exception, I believe, of Ben Minich, I think every kid is ranked at least in the top 250 by at least one service. Because Joe Otting is, there's 2 that are not. Preston Zinter he dropped out. He's not ranked in the top 250 by anyone either, but was at one point in time in the Rivals 250. This staff also, as you kind of get late in the process and kids are committed, because kids are committing so much earlier now, you get into a situation where you say, okay, so they identify the really good players, the top players, but what is the staff's ability to go out there and find some of the sleepers? And I think they kind of did that because Notre Dame got on Dylan Edwards before he really blew up as a recruit and was able to get that one done. They got on, some of the other guys. They got on Keon Keeley before he blew up as a recruit. It didn't work out, obviously. They got on Peyton Bowen before he blew up as a recruit. So we look at it and I say, oh, great job evaluating. Of course, it's easy to get a 5-star like Peyton Bowen. Well, he wasn't a 5-star when they got him. Don Schuler was similar to that. So you've seen a lot of these kids, and I think Kaleb Smith is another example of, obviously we'll have to find out if they were able to close the deal, but he certainly an example of this staff will just look anywhere, everywhere for kids that are impact athletes. And that's the biggest thing is you watch this kid, he makes plays in the run game. He makes plays in the pass game. He's a dynamic return man, and he comes from a winning program. So it's really impressive to be able to, they don't care about the offer list. They don't care about the star ratings. Tayshawn Lyons was blown up as a recruit. They did a good job getting involved in him before he blew up. But then they kind of said, you know what? We kind of like this kid a little bit better. And it really is impressive to balance that. Yes, get the impact guys that are the obvious ones,
sure,
but still have the ability to kind of scour the nation and not be afraid to take a risk on the kid that you like that maybe the rest of the college football world doesn't quite feel the same way you do.
Well, there's no doubt. And I think that it's funny when you're like, you told me about this kid today. And I was like, well, I haven't watched his film because, as everybody knows, I'm not a recruiting guy. That's Sean and that's Ryan. And those guys are the ones that dig deep and they talk to the guys and they do their thing. They do a great job. And once they're in Notre Dame's class, then I'll dive in, or if the guy's on Notre Dame's radar, I'll dive in, that
or
kind of
I
thing.
ask him to be on a show that we're going to do about a kid. He'll dive in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you sent me his stuff and I started watching. And it's funny. I was actually sitting monitoring lunch detention today, and I'm watching his highlights, and I was like, dang, this kid, they didn't ask him to do anything crazy. His high school team does not ask him to do, anything nuts. A lot of screens, a lot of, and he just gets the ball and he is off to the races, dude. It almost looks like everybody else is in slow motion is what it looks like. No. It almost looks like the film was adjusted because he is literally running away from defenders. I mean, just running away. And he finds the smallest little crease. So he's got that right. Vision. He's got really good vision where he finds a little crease on a screen or on a now screen, and he'll find that little crease because they don't have numbers, but they know that he's going to outrun everybody. And so he finds that little crease and he just goes, and it made me very excited about his big play potential because like, yes, there were times where he would just beat a DB and they would hit him deep, of course. But more often than not, in the plays that I was watching, it was they threw him the ball behind the line of scrimmage and then he made a play, and when you can do that for your quarterback and for your offense, I mean, that's exciting. I mean, that is the potential of that is very exciting. And the fact that I did not know who this kid was going into watching his film is like, okay, they are doing their due diligence and they're finding these guys who are not necessarily on everybody's radar.
Yeah.
This kid can play. Okay. I don't care what his star rating is.
Well,
I did the same thing. I looked him up first. I was like, 3-star.
It's always the gut reaction.
But
always the gut reaction.
You turn on the film and it's like, this kid is not a 3-star.
Right.
Sorry. So yeah, it was, I enjoyed watching his highlight film. I really enjoyed it. This kid has talent. No doubt about it.
What's kind of funny, you see it, right? I mean, there's a post, and I won't pull it up because I don't want to put the person on blast, but it says, in other words, he goes, the comment is, isn't Kaleb Smith a mid-high 3-star player, ranked somewhere in the 600s to 800s? In other words, he's a developmental player who needs a redshirt year and another 2 years of development. So perhaps when he's a senior redshirt junior, he'll potentially contribute as a decent slot receiver. It's like, okay, that's exactly the problem that the thing that you should all look to avoid, in my opinion, is to not look, well, star rating. Okay, well, that means all those other things. Like, look, y'all, end of the day, star ratings have a purpose. They're entertainment. They're fun.
Sure. But
at the end of the day, it's about, okay, what does the film tell you? And I think that's the thing where you look at a kid like this and say, well, the film tells me this kid's really good. That's what the film tells me.
Yeah.
And as we've said before, there's plenty of examples. I mean, look, I'll use this one. And this is just a most recent example, but I could do this all day. I could use these examples all day. But in 2017, LSU signs a kid by the name of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson was part of the 2017 class, signed with Northwestern or LSU. His other offers were from Northwestern, Tulane, Nicholls State, and that's it, LSU. And he comes out as a freshman receiver in 2017 and doesn't play a whole lot, right? Then comes out in 2018 and all of a sudden is a true sophomore in 2018, leads the team in catches at 54 catches, 175 yards, and by his third year, he had 111 catches, 1,540 yards, 18 touchdowns, and was combined with Jamar Chase to have one of the best 1-2 punches I've seen in receiver in a long time. This was a true junior, and he was ranked way lower than this kid. And that's the whole point, right? It's like you've got to allow the tape at some point to dictate it. Now, am I saying that this kid is going to be, and he made it official, Kaleb Smith has committed to the University of Notre Dame. For all of you wondering about the fist bump that I did last week, this was it. This was the fist bump. This is the phone call I got during the show that let me know that the kid had committed, because Vince, as you know, Sean, and once I looked into this kid's film, I love this kid. I think this kid can flat out play. So this is a big, big commitment, in my opinion, for Notre Dame. And we'll dive into all the specifics of it. But again, guys, I think you need to stop focusing on the rankings and look at the film.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah,
this kid can play, Sean. There's no doubt.
And going back to what you just said, it heightens my senses about one of the biggest problems across college football and within fan bases. Like, you get so stuck on stars and not understanding what we're seeing from this staff is the recognition of what the roster looked like when they arrive and what it needs to look like when they hoist a trophy. They understand what needs to be done to build this roster up to get to that point. And even though you might not like this from a star standpoint, they know they have a need in that wide receiver room for this type of receiver.
Right.
So instead of going and getting the same type of receiver that they already have in the class, they're smart enough to go and get a tool that's not in their toolbox.
Right.
And it might not have 4 or 5 stars, but they're going to find a way to make sure that it's part of everything that assembles that national championship team. And that's what it's all about. When you talk about Will Fuller, even though he was a 4-star on certain services, he was looked at as someone that was developmental. Am I missing something?
Nope.
Did he get run as a freshman?
Yep, a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit, but
you could argue you should have got more.
He should have got more, but he really didn't hit until his sophomore year. And I think this is something that has become problematic across college football, where fans feel like if kids don't come in and immediately make an impact, something's wrong with them.
Right.
Like if this
you guys talked about that on your show today, right, Sean?
Yeah. Like, oh, he's not starting. He's a 5-star. He's not starting. Something's wrong. No, this is football. Like
right.
Vince, you're a coach. It's not easy.
Right.
It's not easy going to high school.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's football, baseball, it's not easy going to college level. The competition is a little bit better, and you have to prove yourself.
Right.
And there are some kids that are truly blessed that no matter where they go, they're anomalies, and they rise to the top.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the other players that come into your program, they have to work. They have to get better. They have to learn the game at another level. They have to physically become able to play the game. It's a lot of things that they have to mature in. They have to learn how to balance school and football and life. All of this comes into play. And what you have here with Kaleb Smith, as much as people might want to say he's only a 3-star, what he is extremely shifty, extremely fast, and he's something that you don't have on the roster.
Absolutely.
Which to me says, look, this coaching staff is not worried about just stacking players that are the same. Brian, we talk about this with sometimes we were talking about the Clemson wide receiver room. And they just have the same guys.
Bunch of highly ranked kids. Very highly ranked kids.
But they all do the exact same thing.
Right.
So, guys, let's shift a little bit back to Kaleb now that, like, the specific commitment of Kaleb Smith now that it is official. And I did definitely want to finish up that kind of part of the conversation. But to add a little bit more context to the backstory, since we kind of talked about the recruitment and things like that, this was an interesting one. And we'll now talk specifically about how it worked out for Notre Dame. Obviously, we talked about how Notre Dame got on him. And so what happened was he was committed to Texas Tech. And I got word a couple weeks before he visited that this was the kid that they were looking at. And they were thinking about shifting to Tayshawn Lyons, which is why we put that one intel piece about how, hey, don't be surprised if Notre Dame kind of looks at some other guys and that Tayshawn may not be the guy. This was the kid that they were talking about. This is the only other receiver they really zeroed in on. Mm-hmm. There was a couple other kids they looked at, but this is the kid they shifted to when they discovered him. And Chancey Stuckey knew him. He recruited him a little bit at Baylor, but the kid had a jump as a senior, which is kind of what happened to Will Fuller, Sean, to Malik's point, is Will had a jump as a senior as a player. And so Will was more known than Kaleb is, but he had a jump as a senior. And when they started watching the film, they're like, we really like this kid. And once the need kind of arose and they decided that they were going to take a fifth, because it was always a given that they were going to take a fifth receiver. Mm-hmm. But once they realized that, hey, this is what we're going to do, that's when they went after, Tayshawn Lyons at first. But then even though they were in a good place, and this is what I like about it, even though they were in a good place with Tayshawn Lyons, they kept digging. They kept digging. So they finally realized, we really like this kid. And they felt they were in a good position with him. And they were going to convince him to come visit. Well, he was committed to Texas Tech. And the kid was very loyal to Texas Tech because they were one of the few schools that were on him from the beginning. And so it took a lot of convincing to even get the kid to visit. Then they had to convince him to decommit from Texas Tech to visit officially. He was thinking about coming up. Initially, he was just going to say, fine, I'm just going to come up on an unofficial, so that way I don't have to decommit, because he didn't want to decommit if he comes to Notre Dame and doesn't love it. But they were eventually able to kind of convince him to do that. And at that point in time, guys, it was kind of a matter of when, not if. Visited for the Clemson game. It went great. He loved it. And he basically told everybody this is where he was going to come. There's two reasons why it took so long for him to make this decision. Number one, he's been in the playoffs up until, and I actually think that did they get knocked out last week, Sean? I know.
They were semifinals?
They were deep. I'm going to look and see. I think that they're still. I think that they're still in. Yeah, they're still in. Yeah. No, they lost to Reedy Mansfield Timberview this last weekend, so they finished 12-1. So up until this past weekend, he was in the Texas playoffs. So they lost this past weekend 28-26 to Mansfield Timberview. So that was part of it, number one. The other part of it was he was going through a lot of the similar stuff that we've seen from other kids at Notre Dame, like Nick Martin, who really had a tough time flipping from Kentucky, who'd got on him way before Notre Dame. I believe that's Vince. Isn't that where the Martin dad, the parents went?
There was a connection there for sure. It was
right.
It was a dad or a cousin, or
Yeah.
it was some sort of family
dad.
Yeah.
Drew Tranquil went through this. Drew wanted to come to Notre Dame, but he'd
Drew
been
was
committed
Purdue.
to Purdue so long that he didn't want to necessarily go back on his word. We've seen a lot of kids struggle with this, where, and that's kind of what makes him a Notre Dame kid, is because even though he knew everything about this move to Notre Dame is what he wanted and what he knew was right, pulling the trigger officially was just hard because there was a sense of, I don't want to say guilt, not guilt, but just like a sense of, man, but these are the guys that like were on me. They were loyal to me. I gave them my word, and this is just part of the business, right? This is part of the deal, and you've got to ultimately do what's best for you as a player. And I think that's kind of what we saw from Kaleb Smith in as far as the backstory. And he made the decision obviously last week, called Coach Freeman and made the decision, and that's when we got word. So very, very big pickup for Notre Dame guys.
I'm excited. I'm excited because I think this staff, which they've been together, 8 months now?
Yeah.
8.5 months?
Yeah.
Something like that.
The full staff, yeah.
Yeah. So 8.5 months. And in that time, I think, I don't know what you think about it, Vince, but I think it's easy in the spring and the fall to evaluate things while you're recruiting.
Sure.
But then to continue to evaluate during the season when most coaches are focused on game to game.
Sure.
There was a clear evaluation of the roster going on during the season by the staff to say, because this class went from 21 to 22 max to now having the possibility to get up to 28.
Yeah.
And that's a recognition of not only what they need and what they want to do to construct this roster, which is they've decided, look, we're not going to be heavily in the portal.
Right.
We're going to base our program on recruiting.
Yeah.
And that lets us know that they're going after high value targets in 24. Like they're going to focus on a smaller group of kids.
Sure.
They're going to have a lesser number, but it's going to be higher value targets. And you'll probably, maybe you get 19 to 20 kids, but out of those 19 to 20 kids, you might end up with 9 to 10 in the top 150 or something crazy like that. Something that we've never heard or seen at Notre Dame in a while. And so it's pretty easy to see that there is a game plan that they're following.
Absolutely.
Within the program, within the coaching staff, that's not only connected to recruiting, but I'm sure we'll see it in the coming weeks with, how the roster continues to evolve going into the winter.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about sort of the class impact that you guys have already started to dive into a little bit. And first, to begin with, why 5? I think that's the first question, is why 5? Because there's always the danger of overloading at a position, number one. And so 5 basically came down to, number one, is one of the 4 you have committed now is not a pure receiver. Dylan Edwards, you're going to use in a lot of different ways. You're going to use him in the slot. You're going to use him outside in certain looks, off the ball, where you throw him screens. You can do some stuff out of the backfield with him. He's a return man. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this kid. And number 2 is, you look at the current roster, there's 4 scholarship receivers coming back, number 1. And so you say, okay, you can go the high school route with part of it, and then load up on portal kids. And then next year you can maybe sign another big receiver class. This is evidence of, I still expect Notre Dame to still look at the portal for a kid. But what this does is you can be a little bit more selective. You don't need a portal guy. You take one if it's the right kid, but it also shows guys that this is further evidence that this is a staff that is still going to be focused on high school recruiting as the foundation of their program. Awesome. And number 3, it says to me that this staff still believes that there's a lot of value to being an 11 personnel team a good chunk of the time. I don't see any point in bringing in a 5 receiver set this year if you're going to be a 12 personnel all the time. I truly believe this year's 12 personnel emphasis was as much about your roster and the lack of depth at your roster. Now, I think they should have played Tobias Merriweather earlier. We can get into that conversation. But Joe Wilkins got hurt. Avery Davis was hurt. Deion Colsey started the year basically out with an injury. You were super limited in numbers. And some of the guys you had on your current rotation were guys that were a bit injury prone during their careers before, like a Braden Lindsey. Do you really want to give him 70 snaps a game, and then wear him down? And so Jaden Thomas was unproven. He hadn't really shown himself. He didn't really play well early in the year. So there's a lot of emphasis for it. But this tells me that they still want to look more like the team last year, which was a nice, healthy blend of 11 and 12.
Yeah.
And then hopefully moving forward, you mix in 21 personnel a little bit more with it as well. But that's a different conversation for a different day. So I think that tells me something, Sean, that this is still a staff that believes in having depth at receiver, and that's why they went to 5. So just looking at the 5, forget the complementary nature of the 5. I think that right there is why they felt 5, Sean. And I think the emphasis on, while other teams are looking at the portal as let's fill our roster that way, the fact that Notre Dame now has 26 players committed in this class, 5 receivers, 14 offensive players, and they're still pushing for more high school kids is evidence that this staff believes, well, let everybody else chase the 1-year rentals, the 2-year rentals. We're still going to be about establishing our culture, and we're not going to have to deprogram kids from whatever they're coming from to the degree. We're going to get 3 or 4 or 5 transfer kids, and then it's going to be much easier for them to embrace the culture because they're going to be surrounded by the culture.
Correct.
Right? And I think, Sean, that's to me, this is evidence that is still the philosophy that this coaching staff is going to employ, and one that I support, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because that transfer portal is ever evolving, and we don't know if legislation, comes into play down the road, and then all of a sudden things change for coaches and programs that have decided to build their entire program on transfers, whether it be from another school or junior college or FCS. So the traditional route is a long game, in a sense. You're playing a long game, and you're saying, look, we trust our 1 to 2 year development, and having that stacked on 2-year intervals, we trust that more than you having to wait to see who's going to lead a certain situation every year, right? And with the way Notre Dame is approaching recruiting, jumping out early on kids and getting their class pretty much done before the season starts, makes it, I would venture to say that right now, retention is the biggest thing for Marcus Freeman and this staff, but they have to feel darn good right now not to really have a lot of battles going on and worrying about we're fighting this team for this kid, fighting that team for this kid. They're going after 1 or 2 guys that are left, and now it's all about going when the visitation period opens up. Let's go visit our guys. Yep. Let's go see our kids and lock them in. That's our total focus. Let's go retain our class. Let's go check out Peyton Bowen and the rest of the guys and get them to lock in, and our class is good. And now, while they're out, they can even go and get to some 24 kids.
Yep.
And see them and start early on them. So, look, I love it because I think they're sending a message, and you just pretty much laid it out what their game plan is. And the fan base, we have to sit back and let it evolve and develop and just trust, they can get the guys in. We see that. Now there has to be a transition from getting them in and getting them to produce on the field.
Right.
And manifesting wins. That's the next step.
And there's things they still have to prove in that regard.
Absolutely.
Right? For
Absolutely.
Sure. Here's another part of this, Vince, too, is getting to 5 is important, and getting your numbers met is important, and establishing yourself as a development program is important. But at the other part of the day, the thing is that one thing that we emphasize for years, and one of the frustrations we had for years, you and I especially, because, we've been doing this show together for how long? And this has been something we've been talking about. And then you and I would complain about this for years before this.
Yep.
Sean knows I've been complaining about this before I was doing podcasts. The lack of diversity amongst the skill set at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. What I love about this class is you have there's no two cookie. Now there's players there's no two cookie cutters on this roster. There's no a Miles and a Chase, right? What you have is you have a very unique skill set. You have a big physical guy like Jaden Greathouse. You have a long, speedy, take the top off guy like Braylon James. You have the 6'1", 185, 190 precision route runner with great ball skills, Enrico Flores. You have the shifty, dynamic running back that's going to convert to wide receiver that's just a home run waiting to happen, but maybe not an every down wide receiver, meaning he's not going to be a 90-catch guy maybe. Maybe he will. Maybe he could be Rondell Moore, but that's not necessarily where you see him at. Then you have Kaleb Smith, who's he's got a little bit of Braylon James speed to him. He's got a little bit of Rico Flores' route running to him. He's got a little bit of Dylan Edwards' shiftiness with the ball. He's not as explosive, but he's more smooth. Mm-hmm. He's got the speed. He's that kind of complement where he's a slot, but a slot that has the tools to potentially be also a guy that can play outside as well. And I think all those things are important to me.
When we talk about how classes are graded, right? When you're talking about number 1 class, number 2 class, and it's all the point system and all that. And that's the thing I have the hardest. And I realize that's the easiest thing to do when you're a national publication or our national website, because everybody's assigned a number. You add all those numbers up. It's easy. They don't have to understand what the roster management of each team is, right? So it takes the burden off of them and it makes it easier. So I get it. Right. But when evaluating classes, to me, and I know you feel the same way, I know Sean feels this way too, when you're evaluating the power of a class, the rank of a class, it's how it fits onto your roster. And it's how, can you take this recruiting class and basically turn it into a team, essentially, is part of it. And then how does it fit into the roster that you already have? So the roster management piece is huge to me. And I think that this 23 class, not only does it have those high numbered guys that you want, you want those guys. There's no doubt about it, but it fits. Fits what this staff wants to do. Number 1, it fits into the roster that it is already there. Number 2, I mean, it's a fit overall. And so not only does it make your roster better, but it also enhances your roster from a number standpoint from what you were lacking. And it fills in a lot of those gaps. Whereas, and I know this is kind of what we were already talking about before, but I wanted to mention the fact that I love the fact that they're building it from the bottom up. And fans we are in a society right now where it's instant gratification. This guy's going to come in, he's going to beat the guy right now. When you're building from the bottom up, yes, there will be a couple of those guys. Benjamin Morrison is a great example of that as a freshman, right? But when you're building from the bottom up, you do have to be a little bit patient, to what Sean was saying. There's a transition when you're coming in from high school, especially if you're an early enrollee, when these guys are supposed to still be in high school and you're expecting them to be 5-star starters all of a sudden. You do have to be patient, but I think the overall growth of this team and the way that they're building it is 100% the way to go, because you're building guys that want to be there. Number 1, they're not just there as a 1-year rental, because it's different when you buy in to an atmosphere and to a program and to a head coach, and you're there for 3 to 5 years or whatever the case may be. It's different than if you're just there for 1 year, or if you're, and maybe this is not a good example and you guys can shoot me down and I totally respect that. But I think Brandon Joseph came to Notre Dame for the right reasons. He wanted to elevate himself and he wanted to put, get more spotlight on him. He was a former All-American, all of that. But I feel like his mind was set to be a 1-year guy.
Yep.
And now he's going to leave. And I don't know that it boosted him the way he wanted it to, right? I love the fact they're bringing in freshmen. They're building it up from the bottom up. These guys are buying in. The way the staff is doing it is very exciting to me. Even with all the outside noise with the portal and stuff, they're still doing it the right way. And I'm on board.
Sean, I think there was a point that we discussed that's specific to Kaleb Smith that I think is important. Vince talked about fitting together. This is a 5-man receiver class that you can fit together. There's no one guy outside of maybe Dylan Edwards as just a receiver that can only play one spot. Mm-hmm. Braylon can play W or X. Yeah. Jaden Greathouse can play all 3 spots. Rico can play X or Z. This kid can play Z or X, and Dylan Edwards is only more of a Z. but there's some things you can do with inverted alignments, Vince, to get him outside.
Absolutely.
But also he can play some out of the backfield. So
Mhm.
even though he can only play necessarily one receiver spot, he can do a lot at running back. You take Jeremiah Love out of the backfield and put him at receiver in the slot and do some things. So you've got that at receiver. You've got a 5-man offensive line class that can legitimately start as a 5-man offensive line class, right?
Yes.
With 2 tackles, 2 guards in the center.
Yep. That's what
the defensive line class isn't quite there to a degree because there's not a true Viper, but it's a 4-man class. You've got a legitimate starting look at linebacker, and you've got a legitimate starting 4 in the secondary. And if you want to go 4-2-5 and you want to say, let's put Preston Zinter as Viper, you only got 2 linebackers, you want to go 4-2-5, cool. Adon Schuler, go play Rover. Ben Minich, Peyton Bowen, y'all take the top off this thing, and we're locking people down on the outside. That's such an important part of recruiting that doesn't get – and this is why when people want to know why I push back on recruiting rankings being the end-all, be-all when it comes to their points-driven system is because there's no way that they don't evaluate that in a points-driven rankings. They don't evaluate, well, this team signed 7 defensive linemen and 4 receivers that were ranked high, but they signed 1 linebacker. They signed 2 DBs and no tight ends, and they use that kind of thing, right? They didn't sign a quarterback. Well, it's a number 2 class in the country. Yeah, with like major holes in it. Exactly. And that was my issue with Texas A&M's last year, is they signed like 70 linemen, a bunch of receivers. They had a quarterback who I like. You guys saw him late in the year, Connor Wegman. I really like that kid. But they had 1 linebacker. The DB class wasn't as good in my opinion. There was holes in that class. They had corners, but not safeties, in my view. It was not a complete class. One of the things that has separated Alabama over the years is Alabama more often than not signs complete classes. And when they do miss on a position, it's because they've chosen to miss because they're loaded and maybe they redshirted some guys they weren't expecting to redshirt. And I think that's something Dabo always did a great job of up until recently. Is Dabo, when he was really building Clemson, Dabo was as good as anybody doing it the way that Notre Dame's trying to do it. Where, yes, he would go get the big-time, highly ranked, the Deshaun Watsons, the Trevor Lawrences, and the Justin Rosses, but then he would find the Hunter Renfrow walk-ons. He would find the Isaiah Simmons, the 3-star kid that everybody was like, why are you getting this 3-star kid from Kansas? And then he turns out to be a star, right? Like, he made a living on that. If you go back and look at the 2015 secondary, I mean, TJ Green was like a 2-star recruit, and he ended up being a second-round draft pick, So that's the way that teams that aren't Bama, Ohio State have to build. Yes, go get the Peyton Bowens, go get the Braylon Jameses and the Jaden Greathouses and the Jeremiah Loves and the Charles Jagasols, the Drake Bowens. Those are the ones. But find a Micah Bell that maybe is being overlooked. Find a Kaleb Smith, find a Dylan Edwards who's being overlooked. Find those guys, find the Joe Otting that's not getting blown up, and those kind of kids. And that's what Notre Dame has to do. But you have to put a balanced class together, guys. And this is a huge 26-man class. But it's literally a group where you could say, I can put a starting 22 together with this class, and it's not forced.
Yeah.
It's not forced. And that's a rare thing to find. And that adds value that you can't find in a points-driven system. And I think that's another part of this impact that Kaleb Smith has, because you now have a legitimate receiver rotation, not just starters and an extra guy. You have a legitimate 5-man receiver rotation that adds value to what this class is.
Absolutely.
And to the point earlier about the 3-star thing, fellas, or the development part, let's take Brent's the comment like legitimately, like, what if he is a kid that needs 3 years? That's okay. You're signing 5 kids in this class.
Right.
You don't need all 5 of them to play next year. Right. You're going to have 4 kids coming back. You're going to have the other 4, and then you're going to have probably a portal kid most likely. You don't need him to come in and play right away. You don't necessarily need him to play by year 2 because everybody coming back next year has at least 2 years of eligibility left. So even if he is a developmental guy, that's okay. Where you'd get in trouble, Sean, is if they only had 2 receivers committed and your third guy was a developmental guy. And I'm not even saying that Kaleb Smith is necessarily a developmental guy. It's the point is you don't need him to come play right away. What would hurt Notre Dame in the past is they would sign a 2-man receiver class or a 3-man receiver class when they needed 3 or 4, and the third guy would be a developmental guy. Notre Dame didn't need a fifth guy. They wanted a fifth guy, right? And if this kid is a developmental player, that's still okay. And maybe he's not the developmental player. Maybe Braylon James needs more time. Maybe Rico needs more time. Maybe somebody gets hurt. By getting the fifth guy, you give yourself a buffer if one of the guys is not, or two of the guys is not ready to play right away. The problem Notre Dame would run into in the past, Sean, with the smaller classes was if somebody got hurt or didn't pan out, you're screwed because your numbers weren't where they needed to be. This staff has put them in a situation where they're going to if Marcus Freeman keeps doing it this way, Sean, every year we're going to be talking in August, how are they going to get down to 85? How are they going to get down to 85? And that's honestly where Notre Dame needs to be. And that's why this is an important pickup. Another reason why it's an important pickup.
Yeah, and our focus will be on who's throwing the ball to these guys and how many of these guys will be on the field simultaneously. But one of the biggest advantages that we've seen teams like Tennessee with Josh Heupel and Michigan with J.J. McCarthy, they've been able to take advantage and improve and diversify their running game because of the receivers that they have. So now, forget the guys that are coming in. I think we talked about this the other day. When you can throw 6'4", 6'4", and 6'3" out there, or 6'2.5" out there, and Deion Cozy, Tobias Merriweather, and Jaden Thomas, and they're all pretty good blockers. Now, no one's in their base defense, and they're spread out. So now there's less in the box. Now your offensive line can really get after it. Mm-hmm. You don't always have to depend upon 12 personnel to get your running game going. You can do that. You can do different things out of that, and no one can really focus on, okay, we know when they go into this formation, they tend to do this. And when they go into this formation, they tend to do that. I think you're also going to see a lot more motion usage with the plethora of wide receivers. We know that the lack of wide receiver recruiting and the departures of some guys that did come in and commit to Notre Dame left a big hole in their room. And they just didn't have the numbers. And you throw in some of the injuries that happened in fall camp.
Yeah, that
made it worse. Like, we were out there watching. We were watching Avery Davis, not even wondering if he was just going to be healthy. And then we show up for the first day of fall camp, and it's like, he's starting? Okay. And then that guy, you lose him again.
Right. And he was looking good when he was playing. I mean, I was excited about Avery Davis. I know we've said this before, and I don't want to harp on it, but I feel so bad for that kid. Like he was going to be a guy they counted on this year. There's no doubt about it, from a leadership standpoint and from a production standpoint. And just to get that injury, man, that's rough. But your point is absolute. And
he probably would have been a huge glue guy, confidence guy for two young quarterbacks early on. Mm-hmm. And Brian touched on it with Clemson. Like all of that talent they got, when they got into a pinch in championship games, Deshaun was looking for Hunter Renfrow.
Right.
Not
Mike Williams.
Games.
Yeah, exactly.
Davis Scott. Right.
Where's Hunter Renfrow?
Trevor Lawrence, same thing. Who was you had Justin Ross made the big plays, but who was it that made the big play late in the first half that really broke the game open? It was Hunter Renfrow. Getting down the field on the scene.
Yeah,
Sean, I think the thing you talked about too that is worth mentioning with Kaleb Smith is it did not hurt. Let's just say this without giving away too much. It did not hurt that they added Kenny Minchey to the class.
Oh, not at all.
Just leave it at that. It did not hurt this recruitment that Kenny Minchey was added to the class on top of already having CJ Carr. It's like, because now all of a sudden receivers are like, all right, look, I know the quarterback situation doesn't look great now, but it's going to be all right. Yeah. It's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, we've talked a lot about the fit, the impact, the fit, the backstory. What I want to do next, fellas, is I want to do my favorite part of this whole thing. And that is watch some film.
Yes.
Let's break down some film, fellas. And we're gonna kind of show what we like about this young man. This is actually film he dropped today. They don't need to see us, guys. We're gonna blow this thing up. This is film he dropped actually today. Up until today, he had his midseason highlights on there. You're gonna see him lining up in the slot, lining up outside. And I love that he starts with an after the catch play. Now this kid's playing outside of Dallas. Look at the juice.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing you see, guys, is he's playing in Texas, right? And he's playing against quality competition. And this kid runs away. Here's a punt return for big play. But, Sean, the interesting thing that I think it was you that talked about this earlier, or maybe I'm just reading into what Malik said about it. But the thing about Will Fuller is Will Fuller didn't look fast.
No.
Like some guys are fast, and it's like, wow, did you see that guy? Like that guy's really fast.
Yeah.
He doesn't look fast. Will was like, he's got those little short strides. He was kind of an awkward, kind of smooth runner. And then all of a sudden he's like blowing past people. Now, I've been told this kid does have a confirmed 4.49 before his senior year, and he plays fast. He plays to that speed. And I'm talking legitimate 4.49, not camp 4.49. But he plays to that speed. But he's really smooth, Sean. And you see these in these clips. And I think that masks a little bit the fact that he does have speed, is that he's just a really fluid athlete. He's not a twitchy, herky-jerky guy. He's just real smooth. And I think that's where I agree with Malik. I'm not saying he's going to be as fast as Will, but I agree with Malik that he brings some of that vibe, that Will Fuller vibe, that sneaky fast vibe to the table.
And it doesn't take long for him. His acceleration.
Look at this. Yeah.
And movement in tight spaces is what makes him extremely dangerous. A lot of people don't have that, right? He can turn on a dime and get up to top speed. And that's where he starts pulling away from guys. Because his acceleration is on a different level. And the film, for me, I think people were talking about if he's developmental. Look,
I don't see that.
Special teams doesn't have to be developed.
Right. Well, here's the thing, too, Sean, is this is what I like, too. He gets in a stance. He's got a nice forward lean, nice base. He has Sean, or Vince, you especially see this. He has very little weight. There's a little bit of a dip, very little wasted motion coming out of his break. He gets out of his break quick. This is not a developmental type of kid. Looking at him finding that soft spot in the zone, catching the ball. This is not a developmental kid other than maybe, some weight room time.
Sure.
But the thing I like about this kid, Vince, is he knows how to play. Sean, your point is spot on. You don't need to be developmental to be a kick returner. And we're seeing Notre Dame add yet another impact return man from the high school level. But here's another thing, too. Like this little slow
play right
like,
here.
Hey, I got a slant route come, and I'm going to fake. I'm going to obnoxiously do it, and then boom.
And notice he doesn't go to the second move until the DB commits to the slant. That's next level stuff. You don't see – you see a guy doing a double move, but he waits for the double move until the DB commits.
Nice body control, too, here, Vince, on the catch.
Absolutely.
It was a patient route. And where guys get in trouble with double moves is when they rush it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point you're making, Vince, is he is patient with it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another example, gets in his stance. It's not a lazy stance. He has that little stem. So this is what this is a perfect example. I'm using a high school kid's film to point. What do I always say, guys, when I talk about what I taught my receivers? There's two things that I would always tell them, right? The number one basic release technique is you attack his leverage. Your aiming point is his outside shoulder. This, you can see the feet here. This corner is playing inside leverage. He's trying to, because they've got an all-out blitz coming here. He is not going to let this kid catch a slant route and beat him inside where he has no help.
Right.
So he's going to use the sideline to protect him outside. So what does he do? A lot of receivers will just release vertically. Just go vertical. And what this kid does is you see it. He doesn't quite attack the leverage, but you see that little dip. He takes a little bit of an inside release, but that jab inside, because what a well-coached receiver knows is, listen, if he's playing you in a direction, he's doing that because he's protecting that. And if you attack that, he's going to be ultra sensitive to it, right? And you see that here, and then he just explodes. I want to see him use his hands a little bit better here. He kind of exposes his chest on his release move, but he understands what he's doing. He's got to get a little bit sharper with it. But he accelerates past the guy. Great down. He tracks the deep ball extremely well. There's a hand here, guys, when the ball's coming. This kid actually kind of gets his hand somewhat in that because he's got a weight on it, makes the catch, the body control, the downfield tracking. This is a natural football player, fellas. This is not a kid that's just an athlete trying to learn how to play football. This kid knows how to play football.
I love his vision, too. I mean, he sees a crease, and then his speed allows him to hit it. Right.
Look at this, Vince.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy's got the angle, man.
Yes. But he beats him to it. He beats him to it because of his speed.
Ball on the outside arm, son.
Man.
Get that ball on the outside arm. That's my only critique here.
I don't disagree with you.
But he attacks the block, though, Vince. That's your point. He attacks.
Right.
You want to make this cut off the butt of your outside blocker.
Yep.
And if he doesn't do that, that guy makes that play. He's got some juice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just look at him run away from everybody. I mean, not only does he attack the crease, but then he just runs away, and he makes that kid's angle wrong.
Yep.
Nice.
This kid's got some ability. You see, he does a lot. Now, he did a lot more. It's nice little China. I'd like to say him a little bit. That's a nice catch.
Mm-hmm.
I like the China to be a little sharper. He kind of leans on his butt a little bit, which causes him to take a little extra step. And he's got to be a little bit sharper with that release cut. But nice catch to go down and get that football.
How did nobody
really
cover
nice
the
catch
tight end?
Yeah. I know, right? Really nice ball skills. He catches the ball really clean.
Mm-hmm.
Really clean. He did a little bit more outside work as a junior, but you guys see he gets a lot of
he's playing
inside work
in
high school. And he's kind of tall for a slot, which I like, It's hard to tell here, but if you really watch this, you can see he's catching this ball with his hands, not his chest.
Right.
That's the move. This right here, bam.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cut right there, guys.
That's the vision that I was talking about too. Is he understands leverage and he understands his vision and he trusts his eyes, which is huge for a wide receiver in open space.
Yeah. Yep. That is big time. Some toughness there. I like that. I like seeing him be a little bit sharper on this cut, but this is kind of another example, guys. Where's this DB playing him? What's the leverage, Vince?
Outside.
So what does he do?
He
pushes the kid. Yeah. And then he gets that little top end where he pushes him hard outside, and then that gets the separation. I mean, that's kind of textbook, guys. I mean, this is a kid that's been coached how to play the game. Right. I don't know who his receivers coach is, if it's his high school coach or if it's some guy he works with or what. I don't know who's called him. Maybe it's a parent. But this kid has some really nice technique. Now, here's another interesting one, guys. And you're like, wait a minute, why is this kid not coming off the ball faster? He's got a safety to his side. He's seeing zone. He's seeing cover 3. He knows he's got to get behind this. If you take off too fast, that he's running right into that safety.
Mm-hmm. That just shows he has a feel for the zone, and he's finding the soft spot. And then when he gets it, then he accelerates and makes some moves.
Right. Sean, he plays with a really quiet confidence that also reminds me a lot of Will. Yeah. Will was not a flashy player. He just kind of beat you.
Yeah.
Yeah, his kid has a little bit of that. I would like to see him kind of stem down a little bit on this guy a little bit. He just allows this guy to open up and run with him, but he ends up making a great catch. I mean, just great downfield tracking.
Yeah, I tell you what, this quarterback puts the ball in some pretty good spots too.
And for him to come in with the skill set that you have been harping on with the Notre Dame wide receiver room for the past 3 years, especially the 2 years before Chancey Stuckey got here, stemming guys the right way.
Yeah.
And you know what? You can even affect the defensive back by your feet as a wide receiver.
Well, look at this, Sean. This is one, right? Like a lot of guys will they'll get to the top of their stop route. They'll lift up. They'll get choppy. This kid's vertical does a really nice job of sinking his hips, but he doesn't really lift up a lot at the end. So there's no tell.
Right.
He doesn't get – a lot of guys, to your point, Sean, they have that tell at the top of their route. He doesn't. So he's very clean. He can catch the ball with separation and then get upfield and get going. And this is stuff that you're right, Sean. We didn't see this from Notre Dame kids prior to this past season.
Oh, no. And talk about how important that is when a kid gets to campus for a coach that doesn't have to go over this over.
Yeah. Well, it's just the foundation is strong. So, and a lot of the kids are like that. Like Jaden Greathouse is very polished. Rico's very polished.
Sure.
This kid's polished. Braylon James is not as polished as these two kids, but he showed a lot of route running growth this year. So now, Sean, number one, it helps me have a chance to get these kids on the field faster.
Yeah.
Number one, if they're ready in other areas. It allows me to focus more on scheme and just building on the foundation as opposed to, okay, let's start at receiver 101, right? And I got to get back to the basics because this kid doesn't have any clue what he's doing. He doesn't know how to get into a stance. He doesn't know how to get out of a stance. He doesn't know how to attack leverage. He doesn't know how to properly stem. He doesn't know how to, sink his hips. Like, most kids think that the way your top end's good because you use your feet. And I've always said the number one primary break for a wide receiver at the top end is not your feet. It's not your arms. It's your hips.
Yeah.
Your hips are the brakes. And he's got that. He understands that. Jaden Greathouse understands that. Rico Flores understands that. So that means we can start kind of getting into, okay, you guys opted out of receiver 101 by what you did in high school. You took advanced level classes in high school, so we can jump into sophomore level classes. That's what it is, Sean.
Yeah.
And it also, Vince, allows you to then focus more of your football 101 time on Dylan Edwards, who's got to learn some more of those things, as opposed to having to teach 5 different kids that. And I think that's another advantage to it as well, Vince.
And I just want to real quick. What also excites me, because everything you just said, I want to piggyback off of that. And because they're bringing in this many guys, right? And we know that there's not that the room needs numbers. We know this. This is not a secret. But with these guys being elevated and them quote unquote testing out of football 101, that just elevates the competition level to get on the field, because the opportunity is there, right? And these guys are going to be competing for that. And when they're already coming to you with that advanced talent, that just, it's the whole iron sharpens iron thing, right? These guys are going to be competing to get on the field. And I just feel like with some of the coaches on this staff, man, they're going to promote this competition. And the best guys are going to play, period. And it's going to be a competition, man. And I'm pretty pumped up to see it. So it's going to be cool.
Well, Vince, we're a year out from, what happened the day before, and a new coaching, search happening that led to Marcus Freeman. And what happened? You want to see the dividends of bowl practices? What was one of the names we heard during all of the bowl practices?
Jaden Thomas.
Jaden Thomas.
That's all we heard. Jaden Thomas.
We kept saying we've never seen it. We've never seen it. Right.
Absolutely. And then the light went on. They talked about how he made plays in the spring, how he made plays in fall camp. And then all of a sudden, it took about 3 to 4 weeks. And that BYU game hit, and the light went on. Yeah. And you saw what he became. So, the competition you talk about, Vince, Jaden Greathouse isn't coming in expecting I'm sitting.
Right.
That's not his mentality. And I think you have about 3 or 4 other guys that have that same mentality. Like, we might have to work and we might not start immediately, but we expect to get on the field and make an impact. And you don't mind having that attitude in that room, because it does increase the level. It ramps the level of competition up, and you want your veterans to feel that.
Absolutely.
You want your veterans to feel that. Absolutely. So you have to love this is something I want to point out as well. And this goes back to what we talked about with this staff and what states they would attack. I think Texas is probably widely respected on the high school level from a coaching standpoint. Just from a coaching standpoint, most people will move their children to Texas for football for that exact reason. Chancey Stuckey has connections to Texas coming from Baylor, but I just think the sound fundamental play that we're able to see from some of these guys is probably because they're coming from a coach-rich state like Texas, right? 3 of your wide receivers are coming from the state of Texas.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about their fundamentals and how polished they are, that goes a long way, right? You might get a kid.
It can be different than Florida. Yes, Sean.
Yes.
Yeah, see, man, I just should have shut up and let you go. You're going where
go right ahead. You can pick it up right there, because we talk about it all the time. Like, there's a reason why Notre Dame wanted to plant their flag, not just for that position, but wanted to plant their flag in Texas, and did a great job doing that in this first class. They missed out on Malik Muhammad, somebody they were on early, but then they ended up with Kaleb Smith on the back end, who was mentioned as one of the top 5 guys to watch.
Yeah. Malik Muhammad, they recruited as a corner, though. That is, but very similar body type and right. Very similar athleticism, very similar body type, those kind of things. Guys, I think the Texas part we have to talk about, because it's funny. We had Rod Babers on this summer on the show.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, maybe they had 2 kids from Texas committed, maybe even 1. I'd have to remember when we had Rod on the show. And he talked about, we talked about there for some reason, Texas is a state that Notre Dame could probably have some success with. And we saw it. right? We saw it this year with everything that we've seen is Notre Dame made Texas a priority. And I think it's very, very important because I'm not saying that they shouldn't look at Florida kids. But the reality is you can't dismiss the fact that there was not a more Notre Dame fit kid in the state of Florida in the last 5 cycles than Keon Keeley. He private school, high academic kid, values culture, great kid, great personality. Notre Dame got on him early before he was a top 100 kid. Like everything about Keon Keeley screams, that's a Notre Dame kid.
Yeah.
But in Florida, there's not, no, you're a 5-star. You're, you've got to look here. Forget the Notre Dame stuff. Why are you worrying about going to class, man? This is what you need to do. Right. And you don't get them. If you can't get Keon Keeley, you're not going to get a 5-star from the state of Texas other than an offensive lineman or a tight end, maybe.
You mean Florida?
Florida, yes, Florida. Whereas Texas, to your point, Sean, even with Texas being good, those kids, like Braylon James said, I don't want to stay in state. I want to experience the world. When was the last time you heard a kid from Florida say that? And then you're like, oh, this kid's got offers from this Ivy League school, and this kid's a 3.9 GPA, and this kid, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. Braylon, I mean, look, it's a better school systems, all due respect.
It is.
More money gets put into the football programs. Coaches are paid better. And that's another fact for anyone that's like lived in Florida, worked in Florida, coached in Florida, with the exception of some of the top schools, the top down, they don't pay a lot there. Texas takes football super seriously. And, you look at Braylon James is a borderline 4.0 student. Jaden Greathouse is over a 3.6. Micah Bell's a borderline 4.0 student. Peyton Bowen's like a 3.4 student, I believe. And I don't know what Kaleb Smith's GPA is, but
Kaleb Smith has an offer from Dartmouth. So
there you go.
Give you an idea. So that's one thing I noticed this afternoon when I was researching. I don't mean any
disrespect, but you're just not finding a lot of that in Florida that are also dynamic athletes like you're finding in Texas. So it's imperative that you start to make Texas. What did we say before the season, Sean, or before the cycle really took off? There's 2 areas that Notre Dame has to focus more on. Yeah. Right. And I'm purposely doing 2 this way. Okay. They have to see. Sean wasn't looking, so he didn't see it.
I saw it.
Texas and St. Louis.
Yeah.
They now have 7 kids committed. Let me do it this way. They now have 7 kids committed from from those areas, Sean, and they're all skill players. They're all skill players. So I'm just saying that it's this is where they need to be. What are you talking about? You're talking about? I don't know what you're talking about, Sean. The fact that you got 7 kids from St. Louis and Texas, including Austin, the Dallas area. I mean, you're getting them from big schools as well, big areas as well. They're all skill. They've gotten kids from Texas before. It's like tight end, Brock Wright, Nana, Hunter Spears. They get Durham Smythe. They've gotten like Nick Watkins. They've got the occasional skill player from Texas, but more often than not, Cam McDaniel, Jalen Brown, not high-level kids. Right. These are athletes and high-level players because St. Louis and Texas can be the area where Notre Dame can find those dynamic athletes that they're just not getting in Florida and Georgia the way that they need to. And I think that's a very important part to this recruitment and just this class in general is you got 2 top 100 receivers from the state of Texas. You got a 5-star safety from the state of Texas. Yeah. You got a top 100 cornerback from the state of Texas, who's one of the fastest football players in America. And you just landed a kid that's a 3-star, different type of kid who's a 3-star. You got a top 100 corner from St. Louis and a top 100 running back from St. Louis. These aren't just Kyron Williams types who are good players that, that have a shot down the road. Yeah. These are impact day one. These kids are going to help you type of players. And the fact that Notre Dame was able to do that is huge because doing it this year, Sean, is going to make it so much easier to go get that next kid from those states in future years and those cities in future years. And that can't be dismissed with this kid's recruitment and with the others. And we've heard Ryan talked about this on the message board. Who was one of the first commits from Notre Dame to get on this kid? Say, hey, man, you got to come with us. Jaden Greathouse.
Jaden Greathouse.
the most dynamic receiver in the state, the kid from the school that hasn't lost in how many years? Has Jaden Greathouse ever lost a high school football game? Maybe his sophomore year, maybe going back to his sophomore year. Hasn't lost one in the last 2 years. And that kid's getting on the horn talking to me. I'm some 3-star kid that has 2 offers from Power 5 schools that we know of. And this kid wants me to come play with him. Yeah. He's from Austin. That's not very, very far from where I'm from in Frisco. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's do this. And so I think those things are all very, very important.
You mean he was actually recruiting this kid by taking game visits to Texas?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure people kind of
And I'm petty.
Relaxed a little bit.
I'm petty.
I love it.
I just wanted to mention that little tidbit, that some people might have been worried about with Jake Greathouse, since you brought his name up, and the fact that we have 2 more wide receivers from St. Louis on the hook in 24.
Right. That they're pushing for. Correct.
That happens to be a teammate of a state champions, Christian Brothers, with Jeremiah Love.
Right.
And the other one
went off.
Yes.
Off in the state title game.
Yes. And another one that just happens to be really tight with Cam Williams and Ryan Wingo. But, this
and I'm the petty one.
They don't know what they're doing, Vince. They have no clue what they're doing, Vince.
No.
They don't
There's
know.
no plan.
No.
There's no plan here.
No. But I pushed back. I remember we had that conversation. And we talked about Florida, California, Texas, which states would be more important. And you made the push for Texas. And I was like, California has always been one of those main feeders for skill positions for Notre Dame. And Florida, I think, was last for both of us.
Yes.
But I had California first.
Not because lack of talent. It's not about lack of talent. It's about, can you really build a roster, making that a foundational part of your recruiting operation? And you can't. If you can't get Keon Keeley guys, if you can't keep Devin Moore in your class.
Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah. So it's exciting. So let's talk about what's next, fellas. And you guys kind of talked about it earlier when I had to step away. So I heard this loud bang upstairs, like this loud thud. Well, Angela's not here, and it's the dogs are up there. So I'm like, okay, what's Rita getting into? So I had to go check it out and see what's going on. So I apologize. Let's talk about what's next. I think, Sean, you were talking about this when I stepped away. By getting a 5-man class this year, you already have Cam Williams committed next year.
Yeah.
Notre Dame can flat out go big fish hunting now at wide receiver.
Absolutely.
And also still has the room to take more than 2. They don't have to, you only take 2. You can't take too many. You talk about guys that they'll bring some versatility, but now you've got this 5-man class. You've got Cam Williams. So if you are 4th for Ryan Wingo right now, it's okay. Keep at it. Keep grinding. If you're trailing for a Jeremiah McClellan right now, which I'm not saying they are, I'm just making a point, keep grinding. You keep pushing for an Emmett Mosley right now. Mm-hmm. Keep pushing for Michael Hudson, who's a big-time receiver from the state of Texas.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, if you're 5th or 6th on his list right now, it's okay. You're not in any rush. You're good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and even if those kids commit somewhere else, all right, stay on them. And that allows you, getting a 5th kid in this class allows you to be a lot more picky for next year's class, but also allows you to say, hey, we missed a kid. We don't have to panic and go rush to take someone else. We've got Cam Williams. Maybe they add another guy. We can now focus on, okay, so-and-so committed to another school, but man, we really want that kid.
Absolutely.
And this kid's not super interested in us right now. Well, let's fix that. Let's change that. And I think getting him also is impactful for that. You're done at receiver in this class. There's no doubt about that. But it does have an impact next year on how you go about recruiting and putting together the 2024 class, in my opinion.
It makes everything so much. Let me tell you something, man. There's a difference. If you play poker, everybody knows that you can be a big dog in poker with a totally different style. You sit at a big stakes poker table, have 5 guys, they can all have 5 different styles of how they play the game, right? So Marcus Freeman sits at big stakes poker and recruiting, and he sits down, and Nick is looking to the right, like, what is he doing here? And he just got the job. Dabo looks, dude, you just got the job, right? Kirby looks, you just got the job. Yeah, I just play it differently.
Right.
I play the game differently. I might not have the same amount of chips as you guys right now, but I'll be patient.
Yep.
It's like Rounders, the movie Rounders. I'll check all night.
Check
Check all night, wear you down until you make the mistake. And the game plan is clear. Let's get out on these kids before everybody else and force everyone else to play catch up. Right? You know why? Because Marcus Freeman actually believes in the product.
Mm-hmm.
He actually believes he can win a national title at Notre Dame. And the hindrances or the obstacles that most people might perceive to be there, he doesn't care about that. He understands they exist, but they're not an excuse.
Right.
That's like fire for him. Like, all right, let's go. Let's go get it. Right? If you think, I'm sure he's thinking, I had the number 1 and number 3 player in this class. You're lucky I didn't keep him. Watch me in 24.
Right.
Oh, that's his mentality.
Well, and I mean, honestly, Sean, that's the thing that still is a little bit heartbreaking on it. It's just absolutely. Because what could have been if he would have stayed in the class. I'm not even upset that Dante left. You got Kenny Minchie. I'm good. There's no replacement for Keon Keeley.
No.
And it just isn't.
Right.
No.
And literally and practically, I mean, literally meaning like there's no one in the class that plays that position. And the other part is just there's no one in the class that's like him. And you just wish he could have, because think about if he was a part of this class. If Keon was part of this class, I mean, you're talking about this is one of the best recruiting classes I've ever seen.
Man,
for Notre Dame, but really anywhere. I don't care what the rankings would have said. I'm just telling you what I would see on film and the balance of this class. I mean, literally the only thing that they don't have in this class is a elite edge, elite viper. That's it.
Yeah.
Got big-time receivers, big-time running backs, big-time quarterback, big-time DBs, big-time linebackers, big-time O-linemen, one of the better tight ends in the country, and you got really good big boys on the D-line. Boubacar's a beast, and Devin Houston's a beast, and Brendan Vernon's a beast. They don't have that edge rusher. Yeah. That's the only thing this class is missing.
Yeah.
It really is. It's the only thing that keeps this from being an A-plus class, in my opinion, is just that. And you had that.
Yeah.
And he just decided he wanted to go a different path and an easier path. And I don't mean that disrespectfully for Keon, but it's an easier path to go to Alabama. Not competition-wise. I mean, there's competition there, but nobody's competing with Keon. If Keon puts in the work, he's going to play wherever he goes.
Yeah.
It's the easier path because there he can just focus on football. Where at Notre Dame, you can be great in more areas than just football. And that's the opportunity he missed on, or he chose to miss on. And I feel bad for him, but, I mean, that's what he could have been. And he didn't want to do it,
It goes to what you're talking about, being able to focus in. Look, Carson Hobbs is a 3-star. He's going to be a 4-star by the time all things.
Oh, yeah.
You go watch that kid's film, and you're like, oh, I see. Okay, I see what Coach Mickens sees. And to get him blocked in early, and you talk about someone that's a spokesperson already on the defensive side of the ball. He is talking trash. He's letting everybody know I'm the best cover corner in the country. Come join us.
Yep.
This is what we're doing at Notre Dame. You need that swag. And that's something that Marcus Freeman, that is invaluable. And we try to tell people the turn and the 180 as how Notre Dame is viewed nationally on the recruiting trail now, compared to how they were viewed last December.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 180.
Mm-hmm.
And that work to be done in this short time span is absolutely invaluable. Invaluable. And it's just not Marcus Freeman. It's everyone. Chancey Stuckey worked his tail off in the state of Texas to fill that wide receiver room. Worked his tail off. That's another thing. Kaleb Smith, basketball player. Another thing that Chancey Stuckey loves with his wide receivers. He loves for his wide receivers to be basketball players. We lost out on Rodney Gallagher. Guess what he was? A really good basketball player. The versatility. He believes it helps out with footwork and being able to make moves and run routes and the agility. So the game plan and the things that have changed, now we just have to see it, right, guys?
Right.
Retain the class.
Now the on-field
and now
needs to match.
Right.
Like my question now is the issues that were there from a number standpoint. And I'm not making an excuse here. I'm really asking both of you guys as coaches. Have the limitations been lifted, or will they be lifted from a schematic play call creativity standpoint now that you have numbers, elevated talent? It's like, and you don't have to stick to the 12 personnel to get to the things that you want to get to. Now that that has kind of been removed from the table, what do we really get?
Well, that's
side of the ball.
That's the great unknown, right? Because we're talking offense here, right? That's the great unknown. Like,
yeah,
people have to you have to convince yourself of something that Tommy Rees, the guy that we saw throwing the ball all over the field last year, just decided, screw that. I want to run 12, 13 personnel and be really uncreative and do all this kind of stuff. That's what he believed. I have a hard time believing that. Now, again, I'm not justifying what he did this year. There's a lot of things he could and should have done differently, and we've talked about that. But, like, you have to believe that he just, for some reason, or, like, what else am I supposed to believe? That, like, Harry Heastand cornered him in the office and was like, dude, if you don't run 13 personnel and run the ball all day, I'm going to ball you up, put you in my pocket, take you home, and beat you up later. Like, I mean, is that kind of what you're expecting? That there's something that they saw on this team that kind of made them feel like we can't be that team. And it's a lot of things. It was Buckner still developing. Then he gets hurt. Yeah. You've got a bunch of injuries at receiver. You're young at receiver. You're young. You're uncertain of the offensive line doesn't do what you thought it was going to do early on in the season. There's a lot of things that kind of factored into this, and we saw what we saw. But I just kind of feel like, why are they recruiting the way they're recruiting, even running back? So people keep asking why I keep saying he's the fifth receiver, because Dylan Edwards we count as a receiver. Now he's sort of like an athlete more than just a pure receiver, a pure running back. But they didn't recruit 3 running backs in this class, y'all. Like, he's not a running back. He's a receiver that can do some interesting things out of in the backfield, because he's a great high school running back, but he projects more at the next level. Mm-hmm. But you don't recruit Jaden Lamar and Jeremiah Love as your 2 running backs if you want to go be a ground and pound team.
No.
You just don't. Now, again, there's a difference between saying, hey, we're going to run the football. Tommy Rees is going to run the football. Marcus Freeman's going to run the football. But I don't think this is who they want to be. Why would you recruit 7 skill players and only 1 tight end if that's who you ultimately want to be? Or was this just kind of what they were doing because they felt this is what they needed to do to survive this year? Now, we can agree to disagree with them on that. I think there's things they could have done differently in that type of thing. But that's what they felt. And all the while, they kept recruiting skill, and guys that are skilled that can make plays with the ball in their hands on the perimeter. I just have to believe that ultimately that's where they want to be. Mm. And last year, late in the year, the offensive line was doing great in pass pro. Still couldn't really run the ball, but they were great in pass pro late last year. They're playing bad defenses. You had a lot of skill out there. You were a little thin at running back because Chris Tyree was banged up. And what did we see Tommy Rees come out and do in the last 5-6 games of the year? Throw the ball all over the yard.
Yep.
You know, now I don't think ultimately that's what he wants to do. I don't think that's who he is. And I don't think what we saw this year is necessarily who he is. I think that the who he is a happy medium. He wants to be able to run the football, but he also wants to be a guy that can go out there and efficiently complete 70+% of the passes and rip you up. Like, you know, you look at, like, if you want to know what a perfect game looks like for Tommy Rees, you know, statistically, you know, to me, we saw it kind of at times last year, right, guys? Like, we saw it and that was with a team that wasn't really good at running the football. But here's a perfect example. Notre Dame goes and plays Georgia Tech. Jack Cohn goes 15 of 20 for 285 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the running game churns out 212 rushing yards. You know, that's an example of what I think this team wants to be. You know, Navy game, 23 of 29 for 269, right? The Stanford game, you know, Notre Dame runs for 169 yards, not great, but 35 rushes. They 35 pass attempts, 26 of 35 for 345 yards and 2 touchdowns. What I do not think Tommy Rees wants to ultimately be is what we saw in the bowl games, 38 of 68 for 509 yards. That was out of necessity because they could not run the football. Yeah. I don't think he wants to be what we saw against Clemson this year, where you run the ball, 47 times for 263 yards, and your quarterback completes 9 passes for 85 yards. I don't think he wants to be that guy either. I think he felt, right or wrong, that that's what they needed to do to win.
Yeah.
And so, and he made that decision. And I think ultimately the happy medium is more of what we saw late last year, where they were a good run the ball out of, you're just better. And then, but a team that could go out there. North Carolina this year is another game that I'd point to and say that's where I think.
Yeah.
That's where I think, like, an example of, if you want to know what I think ultimately he wants this offense to look like, it's that.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean, you talked about the big trees and having those kind of guys, but I also think back to Kaleb Smith, is you still need guys that you can just get the ball to and let them go do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ultimately is what Kaleb Smith and Dylan Edwards and Jeremiah Love and Jayden Lamar add a big dose of to this roster, is guys that you don't have to scheme them open down the field. Find ways to get them the football now and let them do something. And they didn't have a lot of that this year, especially once Lorenzo went in the tank mentally. He was the only guy that you really had that as far as screen. Now, Braden Lindsey could stretch the field and do like a jet sweep, but he's a speed guy. He's not a shifty.
He's not a shifty guy. Yeah.
They didn't have that after that. Yeah, the running backs they have aren't that way. Even Chris Tyree's not that way. Chris Tyree's a fast one cut and go guy. We've talked about this. They don't have those guys that can make people miss. This recruiting class and Kaleb Smith is a big part of that, as you saw in the highlights, that can go out there and say, we're going to make you miss. That's what I like.
You got to love it. You have to love it. And I think it's going to vastly improve. Man, if you think Notre Dame, I would take an early bet right now. I don't even know if it's a prop bet. I would take an early bet right now that Notre Dame could have 2 1,000 rushes next year.
Well, they almost had it this year. I mean,
That's
they weren't that far away from it this year.
They did that without the threat of a true pass game to defenses to cause them to back up and not bring the safety down. This wide receiver core really takes that next step. Like if Zoe just gets back to what he was second half, freshman year, and Jaden Thomas gets better, and Deion Colsey gets better.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cause teams to say, Tobias is now taking the top off the defense.
Right.
You're not quick to send that safety down to the box, which means now you're giving Harry Heastan a fair fight.
Right.
Numbers
and angles wise, yes. And you still have those guys that you're adding to the roster that you don't have to throw the ball more than 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, and sometimes not even to do damage.
Sometimes behind.
Right, Vince, that's the balance you need. And that's what Notre Dame is. And that's what, when Sean, you brought up my stuff about Clemson, that's what Clemson's lacking right now.
Yeah.
Who is the guy in the pass game that Clemson just say, man, just get the ball out to and let him go do something?
Right.
Which they used to have. I mean, they had that with Amari Rogers was that way. Hunter Renfrow was that way as a route runner. Like, you didn't have to design, just like, dude, I'm running a slant. We're going to get a one-on-one.
Yeah.
Go beat that dude. Right. And those are the things that they need. And that's the thing that I'm encouraged by.
Somebody in the chat was talking about what do you want as an offensive coordinator, right? You do want balance. I mean, there is a semblance of balance that you would want if you're a good offensive coordinator. I'll say that. I want balance on my offense, but I also want to be able to stretch the field horizontally, and I want to be able to stretch the field vertically, and I want to be able to run the ball. Like, I want to do all of those things, right? You want balance. And you want to be able to keep defenses on their toes. You don't want them to be able to load the box. You want them to be spread out, just as Sean was talking about, right? Mm-hmm. That way, Harry Heastan does have a fair fight with what they want to do on the ground. You want to stretch the linebackers and make them look sideline to sideline by being able to do some of those look screens and some of those tosses and some of those things to get the ball on the outside quickly. But you also want to stretch the field and you want to work the seam so that you're working horizontally and you're working vertically. You want a defense to have to cover as much of the field as they possibly can.
Yeah.
That's what you want as an offense. You have to make them stop you everywhere, right? That's the goal as an offensive coordinator, period. So, again, that's a perfect world, but with the guys that they're bringing in and some of the guys that they already have on their roster offensively, that is what they're aiming for. That's what they're going towards.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm excited about it. I think this offense can be special.
So, guys, that's going to kind of do it for this breakdown. We have a couple questions here that we're going to get to in the mailbag. But before we do, folks, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, get on the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For those on the message board, this is one of the dancing gifts that we did, obviously. So there's still 2 more out there, actually. And so we'll see how the rest of them play out here moving forward. But this was one of them, and we're excited about it very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
Got a couple mailbag questions. We're not going to do a full mailbag. We went a little long on that, but we did have a super chat from David Hess. Things just keep looking like this team will legitimately compete for the Natty in the next couple of years. Thanks, guys, for the content. Onward, Notre Dame. I was going to say something earlier, and I wanted to wait for the super chat when I saw it. Marcus Freeman is in the process of putting together, in my opinion, a legitimate top 5 class. I think it's a top 3 class. I don't care what Ohio State and Georgia or anybody else does. To me, the only class in the country that's going to be able to compete with this class when Notre Dame finishes it up, because there's still a couple more kids they're looking at, including one of my favorite players in the class that they're trying to land in Brandon Hillman. Like, I'm not going to hide that. They're trying to land him. Love that kid.
Everybody knows they're going after
him. And
yeah.
He's a kid that he might be the most versatile kid in the entire class if they're able to get him. I mean, that kid could play quarterback, running back, wide receiver, safety, rover. I mean, that kid could play everywhere. But the thing is, guys, is they did this while putting together an 8-4 season in which they lost to Marshall and Stanford. And remember, in both of those losses in the chat, they're going to lose the class is going to implode.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. And somebody asked us, like, would they have lost Keon if they didn't lose to Marshall? I'm like, they lost Keon before they lost to Marshall. Like, I mean, like that happened before they lost him. They lost Keon before the season started. So
why do people think Notre Dame is going to lose recruits before National Signing Day?
Well, history. I mean, I get it. Last year, I get it. It's just this is a different era, is my point, right?
Exactly.
And they did, but we still haven't seen this. I mean, in defense of people that feel that way, Vince, we haven't seen Marcus Freeman get to signing day yet.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so I understand where people are coming from. It's that BK PTSD. That's a real thing. That's a real thing, fellas. I don't want to bang on too much. I would just say that's why you need to stop listening to other outlets and national people and just listen to what we tell you, because we'll shoot you straight. And they did this while going 8-4.
Exactly. With some devastating losses.
Bad losses.
Yeah.
If the product on the field look, they can't go through another 8-4 next year. And
agreed.
This, right?
Absolutely.
But the win over Clemson, just kind of the way they developed, and there's a lot of kids in this class that see an opportunity to come play right away. That matters too.
Sure.
But I think the product is going to get a lot better next year. You and I, we've all talked about that. We'll have all Lawson to explain why we think that. But if the product matches the recruiting effort, this is going to be impressive, and this is going to be fun. And this is why I'm so excited about the future. So what are the reasons that you're excited about the future? Because number one, they're recruiting their butts off. And they've got the number 2 class in the country in 2023. They got the number 1 class in 2024 right now. They're recruiting their butts off. You can't recruit big-time quarterbacks. Well, can't say that anymore. Right. They can't get elite skill players. Well, can't say that anymore. Yeah, but you can't get kids from the South. Well, can't say that anymore. You can't go into, this state and beat this big-time school for that kid. Well, can't say that anymore. Well, you can't get, they lack speed. There's just not enough speed. Braylon James runs a 4.47 electronically timed. He's not in the top 5 in this class in speed. Okay, can't say that anymore. Like, what are the excuses at this point in time? There are none. And Marcus Freeman blew him up in his first class. He just blew up every single BS narrative in his first class. Now, again, I shouldn't say that yet because we need to see them sign. But but we're seeing that get dismantled. And if the product on the field starts to match this, guys, I'm excited. I'm excited. So
once again, now you just have to see it translate to the field. So
sure.
Like you said, we should feel better as a fan base.
Yeah.
Because it's been proven to us that we were told lies.
Right.
We were told it can't be done.
Right.
Guys like that don't want to come to Notre Dame. And it's been proven that's not the truth. We should feel better. We should feel empowered as a fan base. Like we are Notre Dame. You're darn right. Kids do want to come here. We are still relevant. Like all of that stuff was flipped in a matter of months by Marcus Freeman and his staff. It's amazing.
So, guys, we have another super chat. We have a couple super chats coming up here real quick. We have one from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. How can you tell the difference between hands and body catchers as a receiver? Well, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Like, I'm trying to get – well, a body catcher lets things like – because, like, some guys are body catchers, but they still use their hands. Mm-hmm. But they use their body to protect their hands. So it's not just like getting it into your chest. It's not that simple. What to me, when I talk about the difference between a guy that catches the ball with his hands and a guy that's a body catcher, is a guy that's a hands catcher is a guy that attacks the football with his hands. So like one of the things I would teach a receiver is you take your hands to the football, right? Like soft fingers, right? Like you don't get real tight hands, soft fingers. One of the drills we would do is we'd take a basketball and I'd just have them slam a basketball up against the wall. Because if you do that with stiff fingers, Sean, you're going to be jammed like crazy. Yeah. Right. So you do that, just getting you soft fingers, just snatching the ball out of the air, catching it with this part of your hand, not your fingertips, but also not the palm, but it's like this part of your hands, right? Catching it with that, but attack the football and you bring it into your body. What you don't want to do is be stiff. You don't want to be stiff here where you've got hands like this and you're just catching it firm. Yeah. You don't want to be stiff where it's in here, getting into your body here either. Yeah. And the example I use is imagine if you threw a football up against a brick wall or you threw a football into a cushion, right? Yeah. You want to catch the ball like it's a cushion, meaning you want to take away some of the thing. You go out and get it, right? Or you're here real tight, and that allows the ball to be firm, and it's a lot harder to catch it. It also makes it harder to clean catch it and to catch it. Like you get here and then you bring it in. It's just that's a hands catcher. Body catchers tend to be guys that catch the ball right here because they don't have the confidence in their hands. They have to use their body to protect them,
right,
and to secure it. Guys that are hands catchers attack the football with their hands, and that's the difference for me.
You can hear it. I mean, when you're on the sideline, I mean, obviously we're watching film, you can't hear it, but when you're there and you're you can hear the difference between a body catcher and a hand catcher. Yeah. I mean, and it is a distinct difference. Yeah. It is.
Yeah. And that's natural. Some guys are natural hand catchers, the others are natural body catchers. But you can work on it.
Right.
You can work on it.
Yes.
You might not necessarily have the best hands. I remember at baseball events, and you guys might have done this. We spent the first week, we didn't use gloves. We used a ping pong paddle in our hands on the infield.
Yeah.
That was it. That taught us.
Yep.
Right.
We have these flat gloves that just a big thing, and you work on bringing it in.
Bring it in,
absolutely.
Look into the glove. It's the same thing in football. You look the ball into your hand.
Yeah,
like don't take your hands off the ball. Look it in. So it can be worked on.
Yeah, it's muscle memory.
I have another super chat down here from Relly Q. Thank you very much. Given that you can't always trust stars ratings from some sites on players like Kaleb, how do you rank overall classes and against each other? I would say it doesn't matter, but it may to recruits. I mean, look, recruits are going to look at that stuff. It's nothing I can do about that. But you still have, ESPN does not recruit based on points. SIA All-American does not recruit based off points. But at the end of the day, just let the results speak for themselves on the field. Honestly, that's what it's going to matter to. I mean, Clemson didn't have a problem landing 5-star recruits. They never had number one class. They never had they had one top 5 class. That's it. Clemson had one top 5 class during that whole build. And so it's just about getting the players, right? And eventually the 5-star kids will be looking at it and be like, man, I want to be part of that. Look what they're doing. Those kids will eventually come.
Yep.
That's the difference, guys, is you have to kind of build that a little bit against each other. And, but they're getting 5-star kids. I mean, to me, Peyton Bowen is a 5-star. He's already ranked as one. Charles Jagasaw is ranked by On3 as one of the 10 best players in the entire country. He's a 5-star. Rivals, as of right now, has Brandon Vernon in the top 30. I think Peyton Bowen's a borderline 5-star, if not a 5-star. And then there's a lot of kids that kind of have those 5-star tools when you look at a Braylon James, that maybe they're not there yet, but they've got the upside to be that. There's plenty of guys like that. Look, Notre Dame's signing a ton of top 100 kids. right? And so like ESPN yesterday released their updated recruiting class. And they had Notre Dame number 2 behind Alabama. Alabama is the only team that had more ESPN 300 kids on their class. Notre Dame had 17. Meant as of yesterday, now they have 26 kids in the class, but 17 of Notre Dame's 26 kids are ranked as ESPN 300 guys. If you look at the SI 99, who updated their class rankings today, which our guy John Garcia, he had Notre Dame ranked number 2 behind Alabama. Notre Dame was tied with Bama for the most SI 99 players. That means 8 of Notre Dame's 25 commits, now 26, were ranked as top 99 players in the country nationally. So those players are starting to come, and that's how you get there. That's how Clemson got there. And then eventually you start landing the elite dudes, and that's kind of where you are. But you're getting those kids, and you're balancing those kids with guys who are really good, but maybe not elite. Because I believe, Sean, you can have, like, let's look at basketball. It's a good example. I think it relates to football. Is if you have one elite player and 4 solid players, that team's going to be pretty good, and they're going to beat most teams. But when you play that team that maybe doesn't have an elite player, but they have 5 really good players, you're going to get beat.
Yeah.
You're going to get beat.
Yeah.
And that was the story of the Bulls for much of Jordan's early career.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan might have been the best player on the court when they played the Celtics, but they literally never beat Boston in the playoff game. Why? Because he always had they had their stars, but then it was just 1 to 8. They just were better.
It was him, and then the next 5 best players in the series were on the Celtics.
Yeah, exactly.
Next 7 best players were on the Celtics. And so he could go drop his 69, but you were going to win that game.
Right.
And I think football is like that too, guys. It's like, yeah, you may have your star, but I felt this way about Georgia last year. I don't really think that Georgia last year had any truly generational elite talents. Bryce Young was probably the most generational talent on the field last year of those 2 teams. You could argue that Alabama had some of the better players in that draft. Now, look, I know that Trayvon Walker got picked number, but that guy got overdrafted because Georgia won.
Yeah.
Right? But I kind of felt like what made Georgia so good last year is they had some big-time players. Don't get me wrong. Jalen Carter's a big-time player. I'm not saying they weren't big-time players, but what I'm saying is they were so good 1 to 30. They didn't have the talent that LSU had in 2019 at the top. There was no Jamar Chase on their team last year. With all due respect to the kids who were drafted high, there was not. There was no Justin Jefferson. There was no Joe Burrow on that team.
Yeah.
But they were so deep 1 to 30 that they made them a really good team. And this year's even a greater example this year is there's even fewer of those elite players like, oh my gosh, this guy's one of the greatest I've ever seen do it this year compared to last year.
Right.
And yet they're still 12-0. Why? Because they are such a deep team. They're just good they're just really good everywhere.
Yeah.
They're not great at receiver. They're good.
Yeah.
They're not great on the offensive line. They're good. Stetson Bennett's not a great player. He's just good. And it's across the board. And that beats the team that's got the really good player here, the really good player there, but they're just not good here. They're just not good there. And that team's going to win if you're good enough. Now, what hurt Notre Dame this year was they had that against Clemson, but when you got into a game where the play at quarterback was so much superior, you got hurt because Notre Dame wasn't really good everywhere.
Right.
And that's what this class is hopefully the foundation of fixing.
Yeah.
And we'll find out if that's the case. But really good question. And it kind of sparked some different directions on that conversation a little bit, which I appreciate. I did want to answer a couple of these things real quick. Jermaine Hargraves is talking about Tobias Merriweather's red shirt. He played 6 games this year, so Tobias will not be a red shirt. And I fully anticipate Tobias playing in the bowl game. From everything I've been told, he will play in the bowl game, so he's good to go. This is a great observation, guys. Rocket Rebound says, Ronan Hannafin picking Clemson forced Notre Dame to pick 2 slot guys. He said, so that part worked out perfectly as well. And that's a great point because as much as I loved Ronan Hannafin, he was a lot like the other guys in the class.
Yeah.
He was part Jaden Greathouse, part Braylon James. And by not getting him, you went out and got 2 guys that are I don't know if I'd rank either of those guys as high as Ronan on a top 100 ranking. But as far as putting the receiver class together,
it made the class more complimentary.
There you go.
You know what I mean? It made it more complimentary, which is what we look for anyway. And none of the 3 of us would have been like, yeah, we don't need Ronan Hannafin. Like, you know, yes, we would have all been very happy to have him in the class. Okay. But when sometimes things work out, right? It's when Shipley went to Clemson and they were able to get the guys that they got, in Notre Dame's backfield.
Mm-hmm.
I think more often than not, people be like, you know what? I'm glad with what we got, and that's sometimes it just works out that way. And I agree with Rocket. I think that's a really good point. It allowed this receiving core to be more complimentary of each other.
Yeah.
I know people are going to disagree with me on this, but I would argue that the best of the individual players is still Will Shipley. And I know there's others that'll say it's Logan, others say it's Audric Estime, and that's fine. It's a debate to have. But it's not even close when you consider the two versus the one.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
No doubt.
And that's the key. Like, look, Cardinal Tate, really good player, right? I mean, you missed some receivers that were individually, but I have no complaints about how this receiving class shaped up. None.
Right.
None.
No.
I mean, that's the reality of it is none. Because, you may not have ended up with who you thought you were going to get at the very beginning, but hey, man, like it is big time now.
Mm-hmm.
It is big time now. Like this is a group as a whole, and that's really what you need. And we've seen Notre Dame teams in the past. 2011 is a perfect example. 2014 is an example where Notre Dame had elite talent at the top. And I've made this case before. Give me Notre Dame's 5 best players in 2012, and they flat out stack up against Alabama's 5 best players in 2012. The difference was 6 through 20.
Absolutely. I remember you and I talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, we had that conversation. That is 100% what it was. They just didn't have the depth.
Right.
Just didn't.
Right. And those teams go 8-5. Yet,
right.
I mean, the 2018 team, I'm trying to think of this. I don't know if there was a single guy on the 2018 team that I would put in the top 5 of the 2012 team. Because there's nobody as good as Zach Martin, nobody as good as Manti, nobody as good as Tyler Eifert, nobody as good as Stephon Tuitt. Maybe 5. Maybe you could have put a guy at 5. Then you'd have to go, okay, is any of them better than Lewis Nix? Are any of them better than, so maybe not a single dude goes in the top 5. But yet that team was so much better than the 2012 team.
Right.
Because they were so much better everywhere else. Even though the 2012 team was probably a little better quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Although I would argue Ian in the regular season was really good. He just wasn't in the postseason. But that's the kind of thing that's what's made Bama so good for so many years.
Right.
Is just the depth of talent. Ohio State's a perfect example of the opposite. Ohio State is going to be really hard for anyone to beat in a 7-on-7 game. But what Michigan has showed is, but you're not good enough here, and we can neutralize this because you're not good enough there.
Yep.
And what made those Clemson teams so good is fine. You want to play our pass, Deshaun Watson and Wayne Gallman are going to run it on you. And you want to try to stop our run, cool. Deshaun will throw it 70 times.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately where Notre Dame is trying to get to, is having that balance where there's, like we saw this year, when USC could take Notre Dame's run game away, they could do something to a degree, but they couldn't go all the way.
Right.
And Stanford did that, and Marshall did that, where if you build the team the way you need to build the team, with the balance is, like this year, Tommy had to call the right play call for the pass game to work. He had to scheme guys open. What this group does, hey, man, just stop overthinking it. Just throw a freaking now screen to Dylan Edwards and let him do his thing.
Yeah.
Just run a reverse to Kaleb Smith and let him do his thing. Just drop back and throw a bomb to Braylon James and just let him do his thing, man. Stop messing around, right?
Right.
They got a one-on-one, call double post, put Jaden Greathouse in the slot, and let him smoke that safety all across the middle. Just, you know what I mean? Like now, just call a wheel route to Jeremiah Love, or just put Jeremiah Love outside and throw him a screen pass.
Yeah.
You now have those guys where you don't got to out-scheme everybody every single play. And I think that's important. That's important.
It's going to be fun.
That's what this team has been lacking to a degree.
And I will say this. Marcus Freeman, I think, I forget after the game what game it was after, but I remember him saying, no, it was like his Monday press conference, and he said flat out, I think it was after the Clemson win, we're the team we have to be today to win, but we're not the team that we're going to be. And it goes to what you're saying, Brian, like the things that the people they're bringing in this class, you can kind of start to see hints of what Tommy envisions. I will say this. The 2 quarterbacks that he has coming in are definitely key to, in my opinion, their strengths are what he wants to do. Like when you watch them play, he wants somebody that can pick you apart, short game, quick game, but also stretch the field and throw down the field. Because those are the receivers that he's going to, the different types of receivers and weapons he's going to have. So I think, that's something to be excited about.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things, look, you can be upset about the way he's done things to get USC back to where they are. But Lincoln Riley's is one of the best at spreading you out and running the ball.
Right.
He's one of the best. And Brian, we talked about this. You go back and look at what he called on that first drive. He gave Al Golden a night full of things to think about in like 3 or 4 plays. Like, you got to think about this stuff all night based upon what I just called.
Right.
And that's masterful, right? And, of course, the quarterback he had, the weapons he had.
Makes it easier.
Gives him the ability to take that shot and do those things early, right? And put that in the minds of the defensive coordinator. And hopefully Tommy feels freed up.
Let's wrap up this last part, Sean, with a comment on the receivers. Why is it important to get as many kids as you got in this class? Because to win a championship, I need to be able to say, if you're going to take away my 2 best things, I got number 3 I can beat you with. So you want to take away my run game with numbers, and you have an elite receiver, elite corner that can take away my top receiver, okay, that's good on you. But you can't stop me here, here, and here.
Yep.
And that was the difference last year between Georgia and Bama. When Bama lost their 2 receivers, they had nothing else to go to. Couldn't run on Georgia. Couldn't those other guys weren't getting open. They were reliant on those 2 guys. Past Bama teams would have said, oh, okay, that sucks, but we're going to have a tight end that can make plays. We're going to run it down your throat. You can't stop our run game anyway. And that's kind of like the 2012 game. Bama just said, we're going to take Tyler Eifert out of the game. You're going to have to beat somebody else, and Notre Dame couldn't. They just couldn't. And the best teams are going to be good enough to take away 1 or 2 of the things that you do. And Notre Dame was the kind of team where if you could take Michael Mayer out and limit the run game, Notre Dame had nothing else they could really go to.
Not much of an answer.
Right.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to get to the point is where, okay, fine, you want to take away Jaden Greathouse and Jeremiah Love out of this game? That's cool. Who are you going to have defend Braylon James? Who are you going to have defend Rico? Who are you going to have to defend Kaleb Smith? Who are you going to defend to stop Dylan Edwards in space? We're going to go 21 personnel, and if you want to key on Jeremiah Love, cool, we're going to motion him out, and we're going to run it up the middle when you empty out with Jay Lamar. I mean, that's what this class brings, right? And 3rd and 5, you're all worried about these guys. Hey, we just banged a Y option throw to Cooper Flanagan for a first down.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, we're also running behind the best offensive line in the country.
Yes.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah.
Just as afterthought.
That's the thing, guys, and that's why it matters to have the balance.
Yeah.
Not just get a great player here and a great player there, but to have the balance. You have an impact quarterback, an impact running back field. You have one of the better tight ends in the country that fits exactly what you needed. He's a great blocker. This is what you needed after what you got the last couple of years of tight end. That's not meant to be an insult. I love what they've done at tight end. It's just he just brings a different skill set than body type than those guys all do, right? And then you've got impacted offensive line, and you've got impacted receiver, big impact receivers, smaller impact receivers. It's just this is what recruiting looks like the right way. And I can promise you all 2 things. Number 1, Notre Dame did not change their weather, and Notre Dame did not loosen their academic standards. And Notre Dame, as far as I know, has not hired a new chef. So
well played.
Yeah. Pretty sure it's just about working your ass off and
still brown paper bag lunches, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And focusing on what makes you great, not what you're missing. That's what it comes down to. I did have one question here from D. Beasy. And so what she asks, guys, and we'll finish it up with this one. She says, hypothetically, if Notre Dame was ranked number 1 going to the 12-team playoff, would we be bumped to number 5? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So the way that it works, D, is Notre Dame, because they're not in a conference, can never be a 1 through 4 seed. And the reason why is the way, well, this is based on the previous format, which still hasn't technically been adopted yet.
True.
But it will be. But basically it works is the 4 seeds that also get buys goes to the 4 highest ranked conference champions. Since Notre Dame can never be a conference champion, the highest they could ever be ranked is 5.
Mm-hmm.
So if Notre Dame was the number 1 ranked team in the playoff ranking, they would be the 5 seed in the playoff. And they would play the number 12 seed in the first round.
Right. Which is the best group of 5 if they are ranked less than 11.
Yeah.
Right. If they're ranked less than 11, then the number 12 seed is the group of 5, the best group of 5.
Like in 2020, Vince, Notre Dame would have been a 5 seed. They would have not have played Cincinnati, who was the highest ranked group of 5, because they were 8. They would have played, I think, Penn State that year.
Right. And I think people forget about that.
Right.
Like if they're higher up, then they're going to be in
UCF one year would have been higher than 12.
Right.
Like this year, that would have been the 12 seed.
Yes.
They would have been the group of 5 team.
Right. Correct.
Right.
Or at least as of right now. Yeah. So and DeBeasy, the reason that's the price of independence. I mean, let's be honest. That is what you are paying to be independent and not be in a conference, right? You are paying, okay, we're never going to be the number 1 seed, 1 through 4, but we will still be able to retain our independence and stick with what we want to be as Notre Dame, right? That's your payment. And honestly, and Brian and I had this conversation before, I give Jack Swarbrick a lot of credit for going ahead and saying, hey, look, that's fine. The highest we'll be is number 5, but we still have open access to the college football playoff so that we can remain independent. Like that's, we'll take one to get one, right? And I will trade that all day. I will trade being the number 5 seed all day long. Yeah.
And I'll say this again, Vince has only convinced me of something one time.
And I'm going to ride that horse till Bucksy.
And it was this. Because I was pissed, Vince. I was like, "That's bull crap." Like this is bull. And Vince was like, "No, here's why." And I was like, "You know what? It's well done, my friend. Well done." So that's the way that played out, DBZ. And then I just did want to pull this up here real quick because this was really funny. Detroit Hunter said, "Did he say Keon Jeremiah Love?" And then he went to and he said, followed up with, "Is that code talk, Brian?" And no, I did not say it. I said key on. So 2 words, KEY dash 0N or ON, key on Jeremiah Love, not Keon. And I got to tell y'all, there's a lot of people say, no, I just feel it. Keon's going to sign with Notre Dame. Guys,
it's okay. Just let it go.
I hate to break it to you, but you got to let it go. Got to let it go. Nothing would make me happier.
Yeah.
Like nothing. I've told y'all, I'm disappointed that Keon is going to pick Alabama or whoever. I'm disappointed by it.
Sure.
I think he's a great fit at Notre Dame. I think he's made the wrong choice. I just think flat out he made the wrong choice. I think he will not develop the same way there as a young man and a football player as he would have at Notre Dame. I'll take that to my grave. And I think he made a mistake. That's just my opinion. He doesn't think that clearly. But I still love the kid. I do. I think he's a great kid. I do. I've always enjoyed talking with Keon. I mean, I still remember how excited he was as a young kid when he came into Notre Dame, coming in our chat, and how excited he was, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If he called Notre Dame tomorrow, they'd take it. I know they'd take him. I know that for a fact, and I would be excited about it. But it's just not going to happen, everybody. I don't want you, because the reason I'm saying it's important is I don't want people to get disappointed when it doesn't happen, because it's not.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't, and then it takes away from just how good this class is.
Sure.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm at with this.
I think this is the difference. Keon made a choice. From a football standpoint, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I think what you're pointing out is the total development.
Right. He may develop as good as a football player there as Notre Dame, but he's different to me.
I think he'll be fine as a football player. Well, in comparison to the other
potentially. I do wonder, Sean, however, is the fit for him there? Will he be as because if you're not right up here somewhere and you're uncomfortable somewhere and it's not really who you are, maybe you don't develop. But overall point I agree with Sean is
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's not going to go there and develop as a football player. What I'm saying is at Notre Dame, he could have been a great football player and developed into something special to where once his football career is over, the education he got at Notre Dame would then prepare him to turn the millions he'd make in the NFL into many, many, many more millions and more success and more impact on the world beyond that. Because if we're being honest, you just don't see that as much with Bama kids. Some do, but you don't. You see that nonstop with Notre Dame kids. Nonstop.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at.
I just feel like with him, you see Ohio State and Alabama, and you know, okay, you see the pedigree and the history. Just like you look at offensive linemen in Notre Dame, it's like, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. The other young man that chose to part ways, you played yourself.
Right.
You absolutely played yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and
well, it worked out for Notre Dame.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. I did want to pull this up. We're going to end on this from Paul. Paul says, can I please, and thank you for the super chat, Paul, can I please get the IB family prayer warriors to help out with our close friend Anna, who is intubated in the ICU? Thank you, and go Irish. Paul.
Absolutely.
There's one right there for sure. Is one of those prayer warriors. We will absolutely do that, buddy. There's no question. I'm going to talk to my wife when she gets home here in a little bit. She is definitely that as well. And we will, and I will as well. I don't know if I'd call myself that. I don't know if God necessarily moves the way when I pray the way he does for others. And that's kind of part of it, but I'll still do it. And, but definitely the people that I know that are that way, I will get them to be that way. And we'll be praying for her. And I appreciate you letting us know about that. Absolutely. And on that note, everybody, we are done. And we love you too, Paul. We appreciate you being with us. And we appreciate 100%. that you feel comfortable bringing that to us. I do. And so what we always want to do. It's what we always want to do. And then Tommy Guns, our guy, says, my little Leonidas, that's his son, that's his baby, had 105 fever today. Wife just left the ER with him thinking it's the flu, unfortunately not RSV. So the reason Tommy's not there is Tommy's a truck driver. So making this even worse for Tommy is that Tommy is out on the road right now. So Tommy, I'll be praying for your baby boy, but also for you, buddy, that you can stay locked in and focused on the task at hand that you have to get home to your family safely. So we appreciate you very much. He's one of the OGs. Right?
Oh yeah.
So we appreciate all y'all. But everybody have a huge, great rest of your night. Big pickup for Notre Dame. Kaleb Smith in the class. This is a good one. Very excited about this one. Love this receiving class. Kenny Minchie's got to be like, how did I fall into this? CJ Carr's got to be like, this is freaking wonderful. Like those two kids are just going to be like, hold on a second. I got that dude blocking for me and that dude blocking for me, get a handoff to this guy. And now I get to throw to this. Like, oh my gosh. Like, they're just going to be so excited. So, and I understand why you wouldn't be. Very, very exciting stuff going on. So we'll be back tomorrow, 1:00 tomorrow for our normal Friday show. I can't believe it's Friday already, guys. It's crazy. But make sure y'all hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. I'm telling you, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. There's so much intel on there that we just can't and won't go public with. You're missing out if you're not on there. I'm telling you, you're missing out. Definitely want to do that. Read our website at irishbreakdown.com. That's where all of our free content is. So all of our articles. So I've got the class impact story about Kaleb Smith on there. Got the commit story about Kaleb Smith on there. There's got some film in there as well. So you're going to check out that also. So for my guy, Sean, Vince D'Addario, Brian, you are the IB Nation, the people that we love and that make this thing go. Thank you all so very much. Have a great rest of your day. And we will talk to you, rest of your night, I guess. And we'll talk to you very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.